Afternoon, everybody. How are we all? I hope I don't put you all to sleep, though. It's 3 o'clock in the afternoon, good lunch, and then a couple of sessions is over. It's probably last 2 sessions to end the day, so I hope it is useful as well as it's not boring. So excuse me if there is any parts where I'm sort of slow or dragging across. I know it's late in the day, but yeah. So we're all here for Flow Triggers version 2.0. I did name it version 2.0 because I had a session last year where we went through some of the basics of Flow Triggers, and I'll be doing a flashback or sort of like a recap in a couple of slides anyway around that, and then we'll be going through some of the new stuffs around Flow Triggers basically though. So some introduction about me. I'm Ashwin Srinivasan. I've been here I've been with Salesforce ecosystem for over 13 years, primarily from a product background in the first initial 7-8 years, and then now with Capgemini as a tech consultant, and I lead the tech capability as well with Capgemini though. My passion towards Flow came through when this Lightning Champion program was going on, and mainly around when I was doing a lot of LWCs. I'm a developer, and I did a lot of LWCs around the pilot period. And we were trying to build LWCs to work in Flow around that point, and that's how, like, yes, let me explore Flow more and more and more, and here I am today. That yes, with the talk in Flow for the last couple of years now. Right, let's go through the agenda a bit. So as I said earlier, so we'll be doing a sort of like a flashback, a recap of what we went through last year, a couple of slides around Flow Trigger basics and what Flow Trigger offers, some best practices as well around it, as well as like the new steps for this time. So basically we'll be going through when a record trigger flow calls an HTTP callout. There's a new thing which flows there is a new flow element which got released in the last year. So you can make callouts using Flow though, basically. So we'll be going through that, and also I'll be touching base upon a new element called transform element, where yes, transform element could be used separately, but I'm trying to club the HTTP callout with the transform element so that I can probably try to demo. I have a live demo planned. Hopefully, with all this Windows and Microsoft's incidents today, I'm hoping that the live demo is decent and successful today, though. So fingers crossed on that. And then the final part will be template triggered prompt flows, which I didn't have this initially planned, but then everything is now AI, prompt builder. I thought people would be happy to sneak in a couple of discussion about prompt-based flows. The basic, and it's a template trigger prompt flow. So still, I thought it still categorizes as flow trigger stuff though. So yeah, perfect. Some brief recap. So there are 3 prime types of flow triggers which we tend to use. So the first one is, there's no particular order though. So the first one I'm going to talk about is this scheduled flow, where if anybody has done any Apex in the past, they will sort of write cron jobs or any other sort of development as well though. So with flows, what you can do is you can set a time when it can run, or you can set a routine when a flow can run though, basically. So, and you build a normal flow, whatever logic you have, but a time-based trigger for a flow. So the next one is record trigger flow. So there's a lot which we'll be discussing around this anyway today. So again, as the name suggests, if there is any update or any action which happens, like if you create an account, if it's an account-based record trigger flow, if you create an account, if there's any update happens to the account, or yeah, any sort of action on a DML basically. So if there is any updates to a database which happens, it could trigger a record trigger flow. And the last classification I'm bringing out here is platform event-based trigger flow. So when, as the name suggests, if an instance internally or externally you want to create a platform event and then you want to notify a few things, or you want to have some processes which is happening after the creation of platform event, you could use this platform event-based trigger flow though. So and then the next part in the recap is, so what I had last time is a lot of discussion around what are the best practices. Again, like, yes, obviously best practices is something which cannot be defined in one particular way. And now with Copilot coming in play and a lot of AI-based help coming in play, I think there's more and more requirement to ensure like the documentations are good, the explanations are good, the namings are good, so that if anybody picks it up, because it's not going to be anymore where somebody is going to be developing something full 100% per se, right? So I think it's more relevant going forward compared to, I mean, as it's always been relevant to have some best practices, but it's going to be more relevant going forward. So I've put a picture of Flow Trigger Explorer here, primarily because there's a lot more issues which people face when there is a miss of order of execution when it comes to a flow. So in Apex, people, when they write the code, people try to control the code execution by creating sort of a trigger framework and then call the right method of whatever the method is going to be first, and then the next, and then the order of execution falls in play though. And in Flow, this helps massively, and it's more readable, and it's more sort of I don't want to say logical, but it's a lot more easier to use compared to the trigger-based sort of framework which we have, though. So as it states here, so the first is the fast field updates, and then the normal update, and then the sort of asynchronous related flow, though. Each and every section maintains its own order, as in the order of execution. When the record gets updated, the before context of the trigger will run first, and then the after context anyway. So the key thing to note here is when we are sort of giving an order. So there is two ways where you can either drag and drop and bring the order accordingly though. So you can say like what needs to run first and what needs to run second based upon drag and drop. Or you could click the small icon at the corner and do an edit version properties and then write down an order though. The key thing to most important thing to remember here is do not put an order saying 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So if at all you're going to create a new flow trigger in the future and you want to get that flow trigger between the 1 and 2 which I have, then my 1 and 2 are already taken though. So what you have to do is you have to deactivate the flow, and if you're going to move it to production again, like you have to deactivate the flow, you have to reorder everything. So it's a best practice. I think I've taken a quote from one of the tip in one of the Salesforce documentation as well. Go as wide as possible with the ordering number, if at least in hundreds, if not in like say 500,000 and so on though. I mean, I know if you're going to be creating 500 trigger flows, then it's probably something wrong we are doing in business anyway. So hopefully that's a safer number to go with. So that's something important to keep in mind. So that's about the recap. So what's next is HTTP callouts. How many of you have used the HTTP callout within the flow? Cool. It's a few people. Perfect, okay. So this doesn't have to be from a record trigger flow, so this could be used in any sort of flow logic per se though, so it could be like an auto launch flow, it could be a screen flow and so on though. So, but since our topic of the day is record trigger flow, I'm sort of giving an example how do we use a HTTP callout from a record trigger flow. The key thing to remember here is, so if we have to make a callout, the most important thing is we need to authenticate to the system which we are making the call out to. Yeah. So if you see the picture there, for in the left-hand side, name credential, the external credential, permission sets, and the flow. These are the things which are grouped together in Salesforce instance, and then I have an external data source which could be in Azure. If it is in Azure today, probably my demo wouldn't work today though. So, but yeah, it could be in any of the other instances, or it could be another Salesforce instance though, basically. So for authenticating into this external data source, you need to have, so I mean, with HTTP callout, you need to have a name credential, an external credential with the principal, and as well as the permission set though. So name credential, it's sort of like the new version of name credential. It just contains the external source URL. The key thing happens in this external credential area where you kind of mention the authentication protocol to say, I don't know how many of you have been in, done like integrations across with other systems. So you could have a custom authentication protocol. The worst one is probably using a username password there. So generally, you should not be using a username password. So there should be some sort of a certificate or a JWT flow. So there are different flows, and I'm not going to be going into that sort of topic now, though. But there are different flows, and there are different authentication protocol which you can use though. So for admins, the key aspect what Salesforce is trying to do is, if you create a name credential with the external credential with authentication protocol mentioned, and if you have a permission set for the user who's going to run that flow, and assign that principal you create within the external credential to the permission set, so then you get the access to access the external data source. So basically, it's a way to get access to the external data source, though. So and it could have any sort of authentication protocol. So there are very edge case scenarios where you can't use a name credential. In that case, you have to go a code approach or a custom logic approach. And in that sort of situation, for now, the flow, when you create an HTTP callout, it lasts for a name credential. So you have to go with a custom option in that sort of situation. So some screenshots of what we had, what I had when I was creating the HTTP callout per se. So if you've seen in the first sort of couple of screens, I'm also able to select what type of HTTP method my URL is going to be. Yeah. So that is get, post, put, patch, and delete. So basically, get, retrieve data, put, you're sort of updating data, post, so you're creating a new data, and then patch, you're partially updating a data. There's this minor difference between put, post, and patch, though, and then delete, you're deleting the data per se. So you pick based upon what your callout is going to do, and in our instance, in our example, we're going to do a get sort of make a callout to one of the trailheads endpoint, and then we're going to get few animals, which the endpoint is going to be returning to us, basically. So. Right, so when you go to the next step, there is an option which is given by Salesforce where you can connect to the schema, so which will test the connection to the endpoint and see if everything is OK. Or you can also use the example response type, though. So in the example response type, you can define a sort of a JSON, and that JSON basically will be verified by Salesforce in that page, and then you can use it as like a mock response per se as well, though. Right, so I'm going to cover briefly about transform data element before we go and look into the flow which we have built. So how many of you use this element, though? Okay. Far lesser number compared to the HTTP callout. So this is in early days. So there are some issues as well with this. But the advantage of using this is, like, say, if at all you have to convert a particular data structure you're receiving from a callout to looking into a particular data structure which you have in an Apex-defined data structure or an object like an account or a contact, you can start dragging and dropping and mapping it, though. So you can also write a formula in between to say, like, yes, if you have to add 5 to whatever value you're going to get from the external callout, you can do that, or you can concatenate things. You can do various sort of activities, though. So basically, instead of using assignment element, I think a lot of you in the flow, you would have used assignment element to try and inject the data and sort of add a data per se, right? So instead of using the assignment element and keep having every single variable assigned with some sort of data, the transform element is sort of much useful to complete whole structure of the JSON or whole structure of an object type to map it to an S-object type or an Apex-defined elements, though. Right. So let's have a bit of a demo and before we move into the prompt builder. So I always have some sort of a GIF in the demo, and I thought, OK, this time I need to have a movie star who I've thoroughly enjoyed all through my life. And so I thought, OK, let me put him dancing for the demo sort of thing there. So hopefully that's a good omen to ensure like the demo is not getting messed up. Right. OK. So this is the flow I've built for demoing. It's a very basic flow. Yeah. So if you see here, the key thing which you can spot is run asynchronously is where I've used the HTTP callout, though. So the key reason why I've used in the asynchronous, in the asynchronous area or the schedule area, you can use the HTTP callout as well, is generally, in trigger, callouts are not allowed. For prime reason being, Salesforce ensures that because a callout could take up to 120 seconds. I mean, obviously, most of the synchronous response should be in few seconds there. But however long you're going to take a callout to get a response from the external system, or it could delay. And yesterday we had a delay in like for 40 seconds in one of our projects from Azure to get back a response. So if you have the delay, you're kind of holding the DML action to be completed. So it's always, Salesforce wouldn't even let you, so I don't want to say it recommendation. So it's a mandatory thing where you can't use an HTTP callout in a synchronous sort of mode. You have to keep it always asynchronous. So if you have a use case where you can't keep it asynchronous, then you have to see should it be a trigger-based HTTP callout, or should it be a user action-based HTTP callout? Or if it's a system-to-system connection with some other sort of thing, could we start using events, basically, to communicate between the systems? So yeah. So that's the reason why we went into the asynchronous chain here. And I have also, let me open the transform element. So I've also used a transform element where the collection of animal data I'm counting towards into a field called total pets, basically. Yeah. So let's see that in action. So another important thing is when we are having a flow, which is calling an HTTP callout, especially a record trigger one, you need to ensure here where, yeah, one is, we did talk about the asynchronous part, but also you need to ensure like there is a condition which is there to call the flow though. So you can't call the flow every single time. So protected by a condition, a filter criteria. So as we saw in the previous step where we had this trigger explorer where you can have multiple flows. So like ensure this callout flow is on its own and it's separated and it has a condition where, so in my instance, I've just given, for example, the account type should be pet, basically, yeah? And then I ensure here, only when the record is updated to meet this condition, I'm calling this flow. So these are all some of the best practices and tips for using the HTTP callout in the record trigger flow. So what I'm going to do is I've just picked a random account on the Salesforce's instance, and I do have a type field. Yeah, I was worried, and I'm selecting the type to pet. So once I selected the type to pet, there is in the response there are 4 pet types which the endpoint is returning. So I'm doing a total count from the transform element which I was showing previously, and then I'm displaying or basically I'm storing it in this field though. So if you see the flow here, I'm doing the transform element to store that value, and all I'm doing in this assignment is to ensure that the account ID is the ID I'm updating it, and I'm updating that account directly from the transform data, which I'm setting in that transform data per se, though. So yeah, and let's go to the next slide. So yeah, so this is basically a screenshot of the result as well. So I was doing a debug so that you can see the animals written there are majestic badger. I mean, it's classic Salesforce trailhead endpoints name though. So a fluffy bunny, a scary bear, and then a chicken basically. So there are 4 animals which are written, total count which is stored in the count object using the transform element, which is what we saw now. So the next thing is a prompt builder and then a template triggered prompt flows basically. How many of you have used prompt builder? Okay, so I'm sure like a lot of you would have used ChatGPT and given prompts and got responses, right? Actually, so it's basically that, yeah, you're giving a prompt and getting responses. So Salesforce has given a prompt builder where you can build a set of prompts where an agent or any Salesforce users could use, and then you could get responses based upon that, though. So what this prompt builder based trigger flow does is, like, say, if you see in the prompt workspace, I've tagged some of the fields which I have, and also I've tagged the flow. So and you could see I've created. I'll open in the org, so it's probably slightly better to show it in the org. Transfer news, right? So I've created a newsletter, sort of a prompt, and all I've said is like what the prompt. I mean, I've given a prompt on how to create a newsletter per se. So I've told like, create me a newsletter based upon the new player I've bought, and I'm using the account object. And so if you see here, the clubs is connecting to the account, and I'm also using the contact object for the footballers. And the flow use cases where what I'm doing is I'm having a prompt-based flow. Okay, I'll probably show it here. So great, okay. So I'm having a prompt-based flow over here, and what I'm doing is I'm retrieving the contacts based upon a condition where I'm saying for this particular club, who are the other sort of strikers or forwards which were already available other than the new person who have played, so that we can tweak the newsletter to say, yes, this is the new player, new striker we have bought, and then these are the already existing striker, and then send a message to your fans, basically. So what we have done here is we have looped through this element, what we have received from this contact. So I've just, if you see here, I've said like department equal forward, and then I'm feeding it to this prompt though. So all I'm giving is the name of the contact over here. And when I create a template trigger prompt flow, what you have to do is, there is a type of prompt. There is a type of flow which will say like a template triggered prompt flow when you go to the new flow on the flow creation though, similar to the record trigger flow and then the schedule flow and stuff. So in that, when you click that through, you have to have an active prompt where you select a prompt, which in my case is this transfer news, and I'm building this flow to pass in information to the transfer news. So I'm going to select a club. You can see what's my favorite club now. So, and I don't want any booze here, but and I'm passing this prompt to the model which I've selected here is the OpenAI GPT-4. Yeah. So I'm processing the prompt here. Yes, it does take the time to process the details. So if you see here, I got a nice newsletter saying like, dear Manchester United fans, and whatever the details, and we have bought this new player with so-and-so highlight. These are all merge fields. And then these are all the existing players though. So basically, with the prompt using LLM to create the newsletter, we can get a dynamic data from the system, feed the dynamic data into the template of what the prompt answer is going to be, and then make the output to be more useful for the agents or more useful for the Salesforce users, basically. Rather than like in ChatGPT, you wouldn't have the real-time data from Salesforce. So that's what this flow is doing, though, feeding in the real-time data from the system into the prompt, and then the prompt is more sort of specific to this particular instance of Salesforce per se. Perfect. So just going to be closing out with some of the best practices and tips, basically. So as we discussed earlier, some of the ones which around the HTTP callout is asynchronous area. You need to have a callout in place, and then you have to have a criteria always in a flow when you're having a callout. And also the naming conventions is going to be really important. At float unit test, I did add it here. It is still a bit fiddly. I don't know how many of you have used it, though. There are some instances the unit tests are really good, so it generates for us in a good way, but it's still not as good as the Apex unit tests per se for users though. But keep an eye on the flow unit test anyway, and whatever the use cases you could have, please do use it as well though. So another important thing is whenever you write a trigger-based flows, try and see if you have to use custom metadata or some sort of switches in place. So in case if your org admin needs to switch off a particular object, say you're doing a data load on account, and they need to switch off all the flows and all the sort of trigger-based flows or Apex and whatever the actions which are going to happen when you're going to do the data load to the account, then in that instance, so have a custom metadata or a custom setting, then switch off the trigger so that it's one place where for a particular object you switch off everything which will get which will get call based when you upload data though. So that's quite useful when you do large chunk of data migration and stuff as well though. So yeah, I think these are the main sort of ones which I want to touch base upon. And I've also left out a couple of references, a link, which is basically some of the tailored links for the activities which we just spoke about. And especially the template trigger flow, that's quite good because Salesforce let you to create the Einstein AI-based org, and they give you a 15-day period where you can have that org, and you can build prompt builder, or you can do any sort of Einstein-related activity, and then you could make use of it for this template-triggered flows as well, though. Right. So we do have probably some time for questions, I hope. Any questions? I can't see much from here, so that's why I was trying to see as much as things, because so bright the lights are, I can't see anybody over here except the first two rows. Are we all good? Yes. Sorry, Will, do you pass on the mic? Yeah, it's okay. Yeah. Thanks, Will.
Yeah, sorry. You know, when you were talking about the transform element, you mentioned that there were some limitations of it at the moment. Would you be able to expand on that a little?
Yes. So if you have a collection where you have to, the target item and the source item, if you have a source item which is a collection and you have to pass it to another target item which is a collection as well. So you can do to only a collection type though, and the data types as well. So if you have a number which you're getting it out, and you can only pass it to a number back again in the field which you're mapping though. So there are a bit sort of restrictions where you can't do a lot of custom things around it, but you can write formulas. You can change things with the formulas though. But yeah, so these are the main ones I've seen, especially when it comes to collections. If it's not a collection, if it's a flat data structure, it works quite well, basically, if that answers. Yeah. Thank you.